Phyllis. This is Phyllis Gallisath, and welcome to The Journey. And let me just explain a little bit about what The Journey is. The Journey is a show that brings on just ordinary individuals who maybe for different reasons have had setbacks in their life. It could be something that has happened to them, or maybe it's some kind of transition that they've happened in their life. Going from one career to the next, or maybe it was addiction or suicide, a suicide survivor. But it's a little bit about their story, but it's also most important, what did they learn about any setback they had, and what are they doing with their life now as a result of not just a setback, but how they transform through that. And I know that you have your own journey and your own story, and so Phyllis, welcome to The Journey.
Thank you.
But let's start with, just as you get to share with us a little bit about who you are. Why don't we start off? What does Phyllis do for fun?
And I watched some of your other guests, and I knew you were going to ask me this question. And this one's hard for me because I'm just getting to know myself again in a new way. So fun for me is probably a little different than some other people. I think right now in my life, what's fun for me is focusing on self-care and learning about things that I enjoy now. Okay. And getting to know myself. So a lot of it is quiet downtime, reading, prayer, sometimes just, zoning out and watching TV, baths, things like that I can kind of do alone and spend time with myself, getting to know myself.
Sure. And so it sounds like that's, and I know you're a mom, and so I know a lot of times when that's being a mom, that there's a lot of things going on. So there isn't a lot of downtime. So why do we so you have three children, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And your oldest is Liam.
Well, Taya, my stepdaughter, is my oldest.
Oh, Taya's your oldest. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
She's living out at college. Well, she's not in the dorms anymore, but she's going to college at North Central.
Oh, okay.
She actually took off this coming semester because of the sports issue. She does track.
Okay.
And so they're not doing the indoor track. They're doing outdoor track next semester. So she's going to go back for her master's.
Okay.
Yep, and she's 22.
22. Okay.
Yep.
And that is your stepdaughter, right?
Yes. Yep. She was 6 when I met my husband.
Okay. And then, why don't you kind of give us the order? Go ahead and give us the. Okay.
So that's Taya, and then Liam would be 20. He died shortly after his 18th birthday. So he would be 20 right now. And then I have Riker, who's 6 and who will be 7 in December. And he's in 1st grade and he's doing e-learning right now from home.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. And so he's your youngest with your husband, you said?
Yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. So, so have you did you grow up in the Rockford area, or are you from? So nope. Where are you from?
I grew up in a small little town in Wisconsin. It's about 20 miles north of Wisconsin Dells. It's called Mauston. A lot of people don't know where it is. There's about 3,000 people or so when I lived there. It's probably grown a little bit since then. I lived there till I was about 20. So Liam was 4 at that time, and we moved down here to Rockford. My parents were divorced and my dad lived down here. Okay. And he had a lot of health problems, and I knew that he probably didn't have much time left. So I came down to be closer with him and spend time with him. And I had some family in the area. My brother lived down here and some aunts and uncles and cousins and stuff. And I just wanted to come down here and come to the big city of Rockford and start my life here. And my dad lived for about a year and a half after I moved here, and then he passed away.
Okay. And how old were you when your mom and dad split?
I was 5 or 6 maybe.
Okay. And so, and did your dad, after your mom and dad got divorced, did your dad move to Rockford right away, or was that?
Yeah, he moved actually before they split. They had moved from Rockford up to Wisconsin,
Okay.
and then my dad decided to come back down to Rockford to start a business, and they kind of split during that time. The plan was that we were all going to come together, but they split up during that time, and so he stayed in Rockford and we stayed in Wisconsin. And
Gotcha.
I would come visit him and things like that, but I didn't wasn't raised by him, and I didn't have a whole lot of time with him growing up. My mom ended up getting in a relationship with someone else, and he had 4 children, and we lived together, and that was kind of my childhood growing up with them.
Gotcha. What kind of business do your dad have?
It was like a kind of like a Radio Shack type thing, like selling electronics and fixing electronics and things like that. And at
Gotcha.
that time, you know, there was like VCRs and things like that and TVs that people would fix. You wouldn't just go buy a new one, you'd fix
Sh-
it. But
sh- Sure, sure. I remember those time. I remember those time periods where you would have a TV repairman come to the house and repair your TV, or you'd bring your VCR in to get it fixed, and it wasn't disposable like it is now. And
yeah,
it was. And I remember in my adulthood being married and making that transition to things being disposable, and I was very resistant to that because I felt like it wasn't very prudent way of with money, you know. And
yeah, definitely.
but it be, you know, once you couldn't get people to come out and fix it because they said it was just easier just to dispose of it and buy a new one, or it cost more to have it
Yeah.
fixed, then I was like, okay, so I gave into it. But so I do actually know the Mauston area actually, because we have my mother-in-law and father-in-law bought a second home, a lake home, at Lake Redstone, which is
Oh, yeah,
about
it's
20
beautiful
minutes,
there.
yeah, 20 minutes south, from Mauston. So, so yeah, we're like literally right in between Mauston and Reedsburg.
Yep.
And so, so I know that area fairly well. We've been going up there. They've had it since '89, and I've been going up there with Diane since '92.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's beautiful there. Redstone has that little waterfall area that you can hike to, and
Yep, yep,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So, so tell us a little, like when you were in high school, were you involved with any activities? Were you any extracurricular activities?
Not so much. I didn't go to high school. I dropped out of school in 8th grade. I went to homeschool, which I didn't really get homeschooled. Growing up, my mom got in a relationship with a man that had 4 children, and 3 of them were severely uh, mentally ill. They had schizophrenia, and they were very difficult to have in the home. And during that time, I didn't like being at home. I was very rebellious. I didn't really want to go to school. So I started skipping school a lot. So to kind of avoid truancy, my mom took me out and put me in homeschool. Um, she was doing what she thought was best at the time. Um, but I I went back for about 2 months, maybe my freshman year, and I didn't go to high school. So when I became pregnant, I was already out of school. A lot of people probably would think, if they hear that I had a kid at 16 and that I didn't finish high school, it was because I got pregnant and that I didn't finish. But when I got pregnant, that's when I started to want to do things with my life, and started taking some of the classes like at the local community college for the GED and things like that.
And then you got your GED. How long after Liam was born did you get your GED?
Um, I started taking classes probably when he was about 2, and then I had completed everything except for one class when I had moved down to Illinois. So then I finished my, I think it was math that I had to take here, and then Illinois at the time made you take a constitution test, and Wisconsin didn't, so I had to do that. So it was right after I moved to Illinois that I got my GED, so I was 20.
Sure. So I'm going to kind of go bounce back and forth. You had talked about that, being pregnant and having Liam, that that was we could definitely say it's life changing, right? But
Absolutely.
but for you, it it was the catalyst to change your life. And so tell us a little bit about, like, if you can kind of remember back to what what was it about that being such a significant, because there's a lot of people that they may get pregnant, may have a child, but it doesn't change their life. Um, it- so what do you think was different in your case?
Um, I think that being a mom for me just really came naturally, and I like being a mom. Um, and I think it gave me a purpose at a time in my life where my environment and my home and my family, it wasn't comfortable, it wasn't safe, it wasn't anywhere I wanted to be. So a lot of the things I was doing was just to avoid being at home and avoid my environment. And I didn't really have goals or anything to focus on. It was just kind of getting through the day and avoiding certain situations. So when I became pregnant, it gave me something positive to focus on. It gave me a future to think about. It gave me a reason to want things outside of myself. And I guess maybe I needed that because at the time I didn't have the ability to think about goals and things like that for myself because I didn't feel like maybe I was worth it, or I'm not sure what it was, but having Liam made me have a reason and a purpose to want to do things and to want to give him better than what I had, and to make sure that he didn't have to go through the same things that I went through. So providing for him and making sure that he had a better life and environment and family than I did was, I guess, the purpose that I needed.
Sure, sure. Well, and I think, there's an element to that. And I just had this discussion just recently about how critical it is to um, have that sense of purpose, or have that sense of something bigger than myself that I'm moving for, right? And moving forward for, or I'm getting out of bed because there's something bigger than myself, why I need to get out. Because um, I think that when we don't have that sense of purpose, um, life just is heavier. Just as, I mean, life is already hard, but I know for me, I need something more than just Kevin to be able to put my energy toward, and well, essentially get me moving and get me out of bed, because I can stay in bed as I can talk myself into just pulling the sheets over, and just I'll just sleep a little bit later, I'll just do whatever. And if I know that something is needing me to be present and available, um, then then I'll do that. I'll make those moves. So it sounds like that was kind of,
Definitely.
yeah, a turning point for you as well. So tell us a little bit about, tell us about Liam. Tell us about what was he like growing up, and that whole experience as a young mom yourself, but then now watching him grow and everything.
Yeah. I truly believe that Liam was, an angel to me, and I always called him my angel, and that he showed up in my life at a time where I absolutely needed him, and he changed the direction of my life and what I wanted for myself and what I wanted for him. And um, being a mom at 16, you'd think that it was overwhelming, of course, but I immediately felt a connection with him. I immediately felt bonded to him, and I immediately wanted the best for him. And I always took care of him from the beginning. I was still living at home with my mom, but there's many teen kids that have children and their parents take care of them,
Correct.
or they help quite a bit. My mom was working full time. She wasn't able to do that, even if that's what I wanted. But um, I I felt that connection right away, and I think that was really important too. A lot of teen moms they don't make that adjustment very easily because you have to kind of give up everything in your life. But I didn't really have anything to give up that was really good in my life. Everything that I gave up was a distraction and taking away from what I should be doing. So um, his dad and me split up when he was about 2, so we tried to parent together and stay together. It just didn't work out. He was, young too. He was 17 at the time, and it didn't work out. And so me and Liam moved out when I was 18. We moved out and got our own place, and he was a really fun kid. He was always very reserved and kind of quiet, but when he was around the people that he trusted and loved, he would, put on his little shows and sing and dance and things like that. But he had to be comfortable around people. He wasn't really like the big show off in front of large groups and things like that. But if it was the people that he was close to, he was singing and dancing and showing off and stuff. And he was a lot of fun. I remember one of the first times that he got hurt. He was, I think, 2 at the time. And he was singing and dancing and spinning around, and he fell and hit his head, and he cut his eyebrow. And he always had a scar there from that. And I remember that was like the first time that I was really worried for my child. I was like, oh no, does he need stitches? Do I need to take him to the hospital? He's bleeding, and you look back and realize, like, all the bumps and stuff that are to come still, but that first time you're like, oh my gosh, it's so scary. And
Yep, I remember that feeling of just not knowing, and in our case, with Diane and I being together, just kind of like looking at each other and not knowing, should we bring him to the hospital? Should we not bring him to the hospital? Are we overreacting? All those things. So there was a couple hospital trips. So
yeah. Yep.
so
And even as a young child, like, he was very into what you would say typically are boy things, even from a very young age. He liked skateboarding, and his favorite color was always blue, and he always wanted to wear like basketball outfits and boy clothes and be the boy character when there was ever a chance to be any sort of make believe play or characters in video games and things like that. So looking back, it's very easy to see those things, but at the time it just seemed like, he's just a tomboy, and that's okay. And
So maybe for the listeners that don't know your story and don't know Liam's story, Liam was not born when he was identified as a baby, was not identified as a male. He was identified as a female, and so tell us a little bit, because you just kind of moved into it a little bit. I know this is an assumption on my part, but it is Liam was not his original given name. Is that correct?
right.
What
Right,
was
Liam.
what was his given name at birth?
Liam, when he was born, was named Lydia, and
Lydia.
he was assigned female at birth.
Okay.
And he didn't come out until he was 15 as transgender. So growing up, we didn't know. I didn't really, I had actually met trans people, and I had known trans people, but it just wasn't in my mind in any way. It wasn't something I ever considered or thought of. I knew probably when he was in kindergarten that he was going to like girls. His first crush was with a girl. And so I had known that, but the piece of gender just really wasn't on my radar at all. I had thought that, he probably would like girls and he would probably be a tomboy, and, that was fine. And it wasn't really a thought. But when I look back on things and I think about stuff like that, there was definitely signs, and he definitely leaned towards male things. And it's easy to look back and see things that way, but when you're going through it, you don't think about it. And he didn't have the ability or the language to express those things, and I didn't have the knowledge that I have now. But when he was 15, we actually watched Caitlyn Jenner's interview, and she was, one of the first people in the media to talk about this openly. And what people have their opinions on her as a person, and that's fine. But I think what she did at that time really opened up a lot for the trans community, because especially in America, you know, media is such a huge thing. We get so many social cues and so much information pushed at us through the media, and when there's not representation of different diversity within people, it's hard to really understand your own identity because of the way our society is set up. So I think it was a huge turning point for trans people for her to share that story. And I think him seeing that opened up something in him that he didn't have the language for. And once he saw that, he started kind of doing his own research before coming to me, and like realizing, okay, there's a word for what I'm feeling, and this is what it is, and this is what it means. And when he realized that, then he came to me and told me that he, you know, thought that he was a boy. And that's when the whole transition started, and we dived into all of that.
So going, and I appreciate you saying that, even though now looking in hindsight, you could see there were, you know, certain indicators that, okay, that makes sense looking in hindsight, but at the time, it 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 wasn't these clear road signs that said this is exactly the road at that time Lydia's going down, right? So, but and I know for me, as a social worker and then a school social worker, I never put it together that my oldest, my son, wasn't speaking English until he was about three years and like 3 or 4 months, and because we could communicate with him, we knew exactly what his needs were. He was never frustrated. We were that, you know, very in tune to where he's at, and it was only later did we find out that that was an indicator that he had a speech delay, and then that speech delay also tied into having a learning disability and dyslexia. But and I look back and I'm thinking, okay, Kevin, as a school social worker, you should develop, you know the developmental milestones, but completely didn't get it. I mean, some of it might have been the fact that he was our first, but
Yeah.
but it was also the fact that we didn't, similar to yourself, you could, it wasn't, we could rationalize and make it, still say, "Oh, it's still, we're still moving in the right, you know, still moving in the direction, developmentally moving in the direction." So so I can definitely appreciate that, and I think there is that, like I think you were indicating that you were like, okay, so she may be gay, she may be, you know, that, but okay, that'll be okay, I'll love, you know, I'll love her no matter what. um and then, so prior to watching that video, when Liam was 15, um, was there, because I know you had you had shared at one time with me that he struggled with depression. Do you think he struggled with depression prior to that?
Yeah, definitely. He struggled with depression for quite a while, probably started around 6th grade.
Okay.
Um, he he was a very intellectual child. He was very smart. Um, when he was in, was it 3rd grade maybe, they wanted to put him ahead to the next grade. Like, he was doing so well academically that they thought he could go ahead. And he always did very good in school, but I think he also put a lot of pressure on himself. I was never like, give me that report card, what'd you get, and, you know, like, on him, but he would do that to himself. Like, he
Mm.
wanted to get the best grades, he wanted to do really well, and when he didn't do well, he was very hard on himself. And he had kind of this perfectionism in himself that I think led to a lot of depression and anxiety. um, I think I really noticed the anxiety first before the depression, being anxious about certain things like grades, or you know, just getting something right. If he would try a sport or try a different thing, if he wasn't good at it immediately, he was very hard on himself. And I noticed those things, you know, around 6th grade or so.
So, so sometimes in therapy we will look at in individuals in their own learning, right? Not, it doesn't necessarily need to be taught by someone in their life. It's something that they learn and then gets reinforced. that they become uh, externally reinforced, right? So if I
Mhm.
do well in school, then I get affirmation. So I like the affirmation. So then part of my value gets tied into doing well in school. And or for someone else, it may be sports, or it may be something socially, or whatever it is. And then the idea of not getting that reinforcement, or the fear of not getting that reinforcement, becomes almost terrifying. So there's this anxiety that comes with the possibility of not getting that validation. And it may be completely an internal thing. It may have nothing to, it's reinforced, of course,
Right.
by people in our lives, but it may not have necessarily started with any malintent. It just, of course, we would
Yeah.
encourage someone for doing well in school. That would be good.
Right.
Being a good mom to do that, but sometimes there, how a person internalizes that, that becomes the focus. That's where my value gets tied in.
Hmm.
And it sounds like Liam may have had a little bit of that going on.
Definitely. He was very internalized in his thinking and stuff too, and that's what made therapy very difficult. He had been in therapy on and off, and he wasn't very good at expressing his thoughts and feelings, and he wasn't good at sharing what was going on and vocalizing those or communicating those well. So a lot of things were internalized and a lot was kept in, and it wasn't dealt with appropriately, and it made it difficult. And I think that, the gender part of it really complicated that, because if he didn't understand himself completely and he didn't understand how to express that to somebody, that that makes it hard to, when you don't have a language. If I'm saying like I'm in pain but I don't have a word for pain, how are you supposed to explain that to somebody? So I think a lot of it really compounded when the gender part came into it, because there's this whole part of your entire identity that you don't know how to express to somebody. So I think when he was able to express it, I think that lifted a lot for him, the depression and the anxiety, because he was able to externally share how he was feeling with people, and he had a label and he had a way to explain it. And for a while, a lot of that was lifted and he was doing better, it seemed. um, and then when so everything was manageable with his anxiety and depression. He was in therapy for a while, he was on medication. There was no indicators of suicide to me throughout any of this time. um, it wasn't until November of 2017 I bought my house, and we moved in. We closed on the 4th of November, and it was right after Thanksgiving that Liam made his first attempt at suicide. And I was blindsided by it. I didn't know, like, I knew that he had been struggling in certain ways, but I had no idea that it was to that point. So I was at work that night and I got a call from him, and I thought he was on drugs. I thought that he had taken like psychedelic drugs, or he was tripping on something, like he was not making any sense. Um, so I FaceTimed him because I was really concerned. I didn't know what was going on. He was talking about my mom being in the backseat of the car, and I knew my mom was at home, so he was hallucinating. Um, and on the FaceTime, it was very chaotic. So I hung up. I called 911. I called his friends, and because they were concerned about him too. And I met them at the location that he was at. He was in his car, parked, thankfully, and they took him by ambulance to the hospital, and he had overdosed on his depression medication and prescription cough syrup.
Mm.
And so he was hallucinating. And by the time he got to the hospital, he had a seizure and he had metabolized all the medication. So there was nothing they could do other than just let him come off withdrawal from medication. So it took about 3 days for that to happen. I wasn't sure if he was going to have brain damage or if he was going to wake up or what was going to happen. I was really unsure at that time.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how scary that must have been. Not only getting the phone call, but then when you get to the hospital, and how many times do we hear when someone does overdose that they take care of it at the hospital, and in this case, it wasn't able to be taken care of. They could just manage his symptoms, and they couldn't really extract it from his body.
Yeah.
So after he is medically stabilized, did he? I know a lot of times when that with an attempted overdose, then they get transported into the psych hospital. And did he do a psychiatric stay at that time period?
Yeah. So he was transferred from the hospital to Chicago Behavioral Health once he was medically stabilized. And so with him being trans, it complicated a lot of his treatment. So from his first attempt to when he completed suicide was 6 months. And there was a lot of in and out of treatments and attempts in between, and a lot of trying to advocate for him. And it was the gender issue always made everything a lot more complex because people aren't educated and they don't understand the needs. They don't understand simple things about like just calling somebody by their name and pronouns, and how not doing that, how much you are contributing to the issues with his mental health. And during his stay there, they labeled all of his belongings with his dead name, which his name had been legally changed at that time, but we hadn't gotten it changed with insurance. So they were going by what the insurance said, and they were putting his dead name on everything, and they were calling it over the intercom. They didn't allow him to have his testosterone that was prescribed to him. There was just a lot of barriers in the way of his treatment as a trans person. And it was an extremely frustrating time for me trying to advocate for him, especially like when he was in other facilities, like, in Chicago. I had to drive all the way there sometimes just to, speak to somebody face to face and get them to do what they're supposed to do. And I was working full time managing a restaurant at the time and trying to keep my house in order and trying to keep him alive and trying to teach doctors how to care for him. And it was extremely, extremely difficult time.
I can just imagine, and the I obviously don't have any words at the moment. I'm just thinking when you just talked about the fact that he was prescribed due to his transitioning, he was prescribed testosterone, and they weren't giving him the testosterone. Um, One of the side effects of not being able to give him is going to be symptoms of depression in
Yeah.
itself, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's very extremely unfortunate or tragic in itself that you're going there for help, and because of the lack of understanding, awareness, and education, they're causing barriers to his individualized
Yeah.
treatment, right? Um,
I mean, if he was diabetic and he needed insulin, they would have given it to him. So I don't understand how they can't give him testosterone. I just don't. And he was capable of doing it himself too. So I just, it made no sense to me.
sure, sure. So, so obviously that time period, that 6 months, was frustrating on multiple levels. I'm assuming he wasn't getting better, or if he did, it was kind of like a roller coaster, where there would be moments maybe of things lightening up and then getting darker. Um, when you look back on, okay, let's fast forward to, um, so he attempted again. The final time he attempted was in May. Was that correct?
Yeah, May of
In that
2018.
2018, May of
Mhm.
2018. And what was there something different during those circumstances at that time, or was it just that? Yeah, what was different at that time?
Um, I don't know that he ever recovered from that first attempt. I don't know that there was ever any real light at the end of the tunnel. I feel like there was days and moments where he seemed a little bit more like himself or had more happiness or joy or whatever, but he never really recovered from that first attempt. He was very depressed a lot of the time. He struggled a lot of that time. He was, you know, in and out of different places with different, he was at Rosecrans a couple of times. He was in and out of every emergency room. He was in Chicago Behavioral Health twice. Um, it just, it just never, he never seemed to get a proper diagnosis, and he never seemed to get proper treatment. And it really is a shame that the links that we went to get him help and the resources that we tried to use, and we just couldn't get it. And that last attempt, he was back at home. He was back working at the restaurant with me a couple days a week. He was recovering from a knee injury, which was an attempt at suicide where he had got hit by a car. And he had just gotten privileges back to use his vehicle to drive back and forth to work. And I was coming home from work, and he was supposed to be going into work, and he never went to work, and we couldn't find him. It was a Monday. He was supposed to work at 4 on Monday, and he didn't go. And we found his car Tuesday evening, and then Wednesday late morning is when they found him.
I'm so sorry on so many different levels. No parent, no parent should have to go through that at all, and go through outliving their child, let alone the frustration of the what led up to the May of 2018. And I know that, at least my experience when I've worked with people who've struggled with depression, and is that the depression itself lies to us, just like the anxiety, right? It lies to us and distorts the truth. Similar to what you said when he had taken that cough syrup, where it's not exactly the same, or it can be. Typically, it's not like a hallucinogenic, but it definitely the voice. The thoughts are so strong. It's not actually a voice, but it's the thoughts that are so strong that it seems so convincing,
Yeah.
that it's hard to combat that. And then was during that time period and I know that he struggled with articulating what was going on and putting it to words. Was he able to share what was going on?
There was no specific thing. There was nothing. It was a lot of vague. He, after his 18th birthday, let me back up a little bit. So he was in Rosecrans during his 18th birthday. This was after he was recovering from being hit by a car. And he had knee surgery. And after that knee surgery, he stopped sleeping, and he went into a catatonic state, and he had to be taken to Swedish American from Rosecrans in inpatient treatment. And this was the day after his 18th birthday. So because of HIPAA laws, they wouldn't even confirm to me that he was there, even though I knew that he was, because Rosecrans transferred him and Rosecrans told me, but they wouldn't let me they wouldn't even confirm that he was there. I had to go to court and get guardianship over him so that I could even communicate with the doctors in the hospital about his treatment and stuff, because he wasn't even speaking at that point. And so after that episode, he became even deeper into this depression that was so bad that he was even, I'm trying to think of the proper term for it, but he wasn't experiencing reality correctly. Like, he was thinking that people were against him, and he was thinking like people were laughing at him when they weren't, and things like that. Like, it was so severe that he wasn't really in reality. You know, he had a a friend that he thought hated him and stuff. And I had that friend come over and we sat down and we talked, and the friend was like, no, I don't feel that way. I love you. You're my friend. And like, there's no evidence that could convince him otherwise of his thinking. And it was so frustrating that, he's living in such a dark place, and that those thoughts are so bad that he's believing them even with evidence to prove otherwise. And he was never diagnosed with anything other than severe depression and anxiety. And his therapist said that, his depression was just so severe that it was convincing him of these things that weren't true.
And there is and I don't, and again, not knowing what his therapist was sharing, but there is an element to that when depression can have psychotic features, and
Mm-hmm.
and and I think that's kind of what I'm hearing you say, is that there was,
Yeah.
I mean, Liam had, Liam had a multitude of things going on, life-wise things were going on, but there was definitely a strong chemical imbalance that was happening, and because of the trans aspect of it, and because of how he internalized, um, those things were complicating his treatment.
Absolutely.
And that's not to say that even if those factors weren't there, that it still wouldn't be a difficult to find the right balance of medication and the right balance of therapy along with that, because it's the more severe the chemical imbalances, the more difficult it is, even if we're able to articulate really well what's happening, and we even get to dial in the right treatment. But so it sounds like there was a lot of different things that were playing into this at the same time. So tell us a little bit about with your journey. And again, I know that prior to May of 2018, Liam had gotten involved in regarding advocating to help others who were in the LGBT community, and because the people that I've talked to, because that went to Harlem with him, as you said, spoke very highly of him. So that he was not only this had an energy, but he had people they liked Liam. They
Yeah.
and that was staff as well as other students. So tell us a little bit about that part of him getting involved, and I think both you and him getting involved with some advocacy even prior to his death.
Yeah. With him coming out, it was his sophomore year, so he was going into the Harlem main campus from the freshman campus, and he wanted to change his name at school. So we went through registration and everything, and everyone was really kind and nice and helpful and was like, yeah, no problem, we'll change his name. And school started, and they realized, like, well, there's Skyward and there's all these things that we need to consider, and we can't really just go and do this. And so that year was really hard for him because he had to be constantly correcting and letting people know, like, this is my name, these are my pronouns. If there was a substitute teacher, it was filling them in. So he had to constantly be advocating for himself at school. And the school had already been doing a lot of diversity training and was already wanting to implement some things, but Liam really pushed for that to happen because they actually had, a kid here that needed help. So we were part of a team that created a transgender inclusive policy for Harlem School District students. We worked for about 9 months. It was me, Liam, some other students, some staff, some board members, and we worked with Illinois Safe Schools Alliance, and we created this policy so that would be inclusive and so that people could change their name in the system, and so they could change their gender, and and it accounts for dress code and locker rooms and bathrooms, and whether or not this kid is out at home and they want to share that with their family. And it has all these multiple facets to the policy, which is really great. And it's been very helpful to the students there, and they use it often. And they're actually, I'm on a team now that's creating one for their staff so that their staff can have the same policy coverage too. So if there's any teachers or anyone that wants to transition, that they're covered through policy too, and they're safe and able to do so. Um, so during that time, I was also starting the PFLAG chapter in Rockford. Being a mom of a trans person and not knowing all these things that I know now after educating myself, I wanted to learn, and I wanted to help others in the area that might not know what to do or where to go for resources. So we started the PFLAG chapter, and really just started networking with people and getting our name out there and meeting different people in the queer community and having events and things like that. And Liam was on his GSA. He was the president of the GSA at Harlem, and he was a part of a youth group through the Illinois Safe Schools Alliance that helped with that policy. Lots of kids from all over the state would come together, and they had a action camp every summer, and they would have different events throughout the year and different meetings and things like that. So he was very involved in learning about the community and advocating for the community. And I think a lot of the younger kids too, like, looked up to him as, like, somebody in the community that they could go to and ask questions, or if they needed help or resources, he could help guide them to them and things like that. And I think a lot of people that knew him didn't know about, his depression and stuff like that. And it didn't get real bad there till the end, but people would meet him and see him, and they would see him smiling, and they would see him laughing, and they would see him comforting other people and being, kind to them. And just his personality and stuff, they didn't see the pain that was behind all of that, and they didn't understand that, how much he was hurting behind that, because he was always there to comfort other people, and he was always there to stand up for somebody else. And he didn't come off that he was struggling so much.
Real quick, just so that people know, PFLAG stands for.
It used to stand for Parents, Family, Friends, and of Lesbians and Gays, but it's not an acronym anymore. It's the world's largest organization for LGBTQ people and their loved ones. So
Gotcha.
our mission is support, education, and advocacy. So it's made up of parents, allies, friends, queer people, and we want to support those people. We want to advocate for them, and we want to educate people that don't know about issues that are pertaining to that community.
Great, thank you. You said something just a second. I know we talked earlier how when Liam was born, not only was it was life changing, but it was a catalyst for you to change your life and gave you a sense of purpose and meaning. And it sounds like similar to for Liam, as he grew in his transition, being transgender, as he grew into that, then he also then had a sense of purpose, to being able to help other individuals who may be struggling. And I'm glad we're talking about this from an aspect of that. Even though it is critically important to have a sense of purpose and a sense of mission, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make everything go away, right? Doesn't mean that it's it's going to magically make a severe chemical imbalance righted. Yes, it's true. It can help continue to advocate for ourselves and those types of things, but it's not it's multifaceted. It's a sense of making sure that we are doing self-care, like you said, that you're working on for yourself, a sense of purpose, working with making sure that we have our health is taken care of, regardless if it is diabetes or some type of mental illness. I know now as that what Liam wanted to do and what you wanted to do while Liam was going through his high school years, that didn't stop just because he died in 2018. You've been an advocate for the last, since his death, 2+ years ago. So tell us about what are you doing now? I mean, because Yeah, tell us about what you're involved with now, as you've been going through your own grief process, but also continue to carry that, um, no pun intended, carrying that flag. So,
Yeah.
to yes,
Well, we started the Liam Foundation this year, in 2020. At the beginning of the year, we officially became a nonprofit. Um, but it kind of started before that. The first year that Liam was gone, I wanted to give him a Christmas present, and I wanted to do something to honor him. So I decided I would take, at the time, it was like a little over $300, and I would pay for a name change for a trans person. So to do that, you file through the court system and you get it approved by a judge, and there's court fees involved. So I decided I would do that in his honor. It ended up being a friend of his that is in that Our City, Our Story video, Eden. And it just felt really good to do something in honor of him for trans people. And it really was healing for me. And I enjoyed doing that. And people responded really well to it. And I started raising funds to do that. So I started just doing that on my own, and raising money and taking people and going with them and taking them to file paperwork and going with them to court, and just being someone there for them through that process. Um, and I met Scotty last year. She is an intersex person who speaks to different GSAs, and she had met Liam at one of their meetings, and she remembered Liam, and Liam had stuck with her because afterwards she stayed and talked with the kids. And when we talked on the phone for the first time, she was telling me about Liam, and she's like, I remember him, and I saw this video, and I never would have thought that he'd be one of these kids. She said, I meet kids all the time that I'm concerned about, and I was not concerned about Liam. And I was very shocked. She remembered that he had everybody sitting around him, like he was in the middle, and everybody was sitting by him and wanted to be near him, and could tell that they were all like drawn to him. And he spoke a lot about me, and very lovingly, and proud of his mom. And she said what struck her too is that, when he would talk about these things that had been done, he wasn't taking credit for them himself. He was expressing how he was a part of these things. And she just thought that was very cool for, a kid his age to not try to boast and take credit for these things, and that he just wanted to share with her. And we talked about kind of our dreams of what we would like to do, and we both wanted to do more for the community and have some sort of physical place that people could go. And we started talking about this resource center, and we realized that, we wanted to make a board and make this official. And so beginning of this year, we became a 501c3, and we got our office space. It's in the Waterside building near City Market. And so we are the first resource center for LGBTQI people in Rockford, and we just want to have a safe space that people can go to, and we can connect them with services. We can help them with legal name changes. We can help find them affirming care, whether it's healthcare or therapists, or just whatever it is they need. Sometimes just navigating these systems and not having somebody there with you that you can trust can be hard and can be overwhelming. And we just want to, be there for people that need it.
Well, I got a chance to meet Scotty earlier this year. We were doing a project together, and then COVID happened, and then that project got put on the shelf, at least temporarily. So, and she has a lot of energy. There's, so
Yes, she
I
does.
can so I can
I'm
definitely,
thankful for that,
yeah, I can
because I
definitely,
don't have
yeah,
it.
I can definitely see how that would be a good person to have on your team,
Yes.
from that aspect of it. And I give you guys just a ton of credit for being able to, to move forward with this, and be able to be that resource, because it's like you said, it's so much, it's so needed, because I think the average person doesn't really fully grasp, right, that just as we were talking about Liam's story, his mental illness did not have anything to do with him being transgender, but it did complicate the treatment of his mental illness. and and
Absolutely.
and and I don't know if the average person really, or for that matter professionals, understand that that sometimes they see it, well, this it caused this. Well, no. Sometimes maybe, but in this particular case that wasn't the case, because he could, um like you said, he drew people into him. He had that energy, he had that light, but and that didn't mean that it was fake, but it didn't necessarily mean that it would erase everything as well. Meaning it didn't allow the chemical imbalance to be stabilized. And when it started getting in toward those last 6 months, it sounded like it was definitely in a much darker place. Well, Phyllis, I so appreciate you being on the show today, telling not only Liam's story, but then telling your story about what you're doing. And as you're continuing your own journey, I saw that you were attempting to write some grants last night.
Yeah.
That is why there are grant writers, my friend.
I know, but when you don't have money to give people for things, you just got to do them yourself.
I totally, I totally resemble that and appreciate that, because I've attempted to do them myself. And I'm going to put a shout out to someone who does a nice job of helping with grant writing, and he's very reasonable priced. Alex Gary is someone who's been on the
Awesome.
show before. He also graduated from Harlem, and but he helped me write some grants for Shatter Our Silence. So
Awesome.
he may be a person to contact as well.
Okay.
But but you got to keep on giving it a shot yourself, and just
Yeah.
and just your own journey of someone who have who wasn't in school, in a traditional school, and had your own hardships growing up, and sounds like not a safe place to be growing up and living in. And what you've been doing is pretty amazing in itself. So, Phyllis, thank you for being with us. Once again, what's the best way for people to reach you if they either want to support, or if they just in their own journey needed to reach out to you either as a parent or as a young person?
Yeah. PFLAG and the Liam Foundation both have Facebook pages that you can reach us at. And then we both have websites, pflagrockford.org, that you can contact us through, and then the liamfoundation.org.
Perfect. Well, thank you again very much, and we'll be connecting again as we're doing some events coming up in the next month for Mental Health Awareness Month is in October, and I'll be reaching out to you and having you guys see if you guys can be part of that as well. So, all right.
Perfect.
So I'll
Thank
talk
you.
to you soon. Thank you.
Okay.